Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining Armanino today. We are doing a webinar on reporting and analytics for Intacct that you can't afford to ignore. First, I'd like to walk you through how to use your webinar pane. You'll see the webinar pane in front of you. Please note that the orange arrow will allow you to minimize or maximize the pane. If it is minimized, simply click on the orange arrow to bring it back. Feel free to submit any questions that you have for our presenters during the duration of the webinar. Our presenters will handle those questions at the end of the webinar as time permits. And all of you will receive an email in the next 48 hours with a link to the recorded webinar and a copy of the slides. Additionally, we want to help you with your audio settings. So if you're using your telephone to listen in on our webinar, please make sure you select Use Telephone. If you're listening through your computer speakers, please select Use Mic and Speakers. If you have the incorrect settings selected, it will produce an echo sound. And now I am pleased to introduce our first presenter, John Dunnican, a partner in our CFO Advisory Services practice. John has over 30 years of financial executive, operations, and consulting experience in public and private companies. John has worked in the technology, manufacturing, publishing, service and distribution, and banking industries. John leads our cloud budgeting, planning, and forecasting practice and has helped more than 100 clients streamline and drive greater value from this essential business process.
Thank you, Murray.
And next we have Scott Schimberg. Scott's a director of our CFO Advisory Services practice. He's also a member of the Institute of Management Accountants, and he rejoined Armanino in February of 2012 after working in industry. He now heads up our Intacct consulting practice, which has completed 200 successful implementations.
Thank you, Mary.
Sure. And today during our webinar, you're going to learn, you'll recognize the power of automated data between adaptive planning and Intacct. You'll implement rolling forecasts to optimize decision-making for better sales planning, analysis of key performance metrics, and creation of what-if scenarios. Finally, we're going to explore the myriad of powerful reporting and forecasting functionality offered by the combined solution. So for our agenda today, we're going to cover best-of-breed cloud solutions, both Intacct and Adaptive Insights. I should make note that Adaptive Planning just today changed its corporate name to Adaptive Insights, so you're getting a preview. You're one of the first to hear about this. Then we will also cover the Intacct Adaptive Planning Systems Comparison. So you can see we needed to update our slides a little on this. We'll talk about our points of integration and our typical user functions for each system. And then we will share with you an integrated demo. And with that, we'd actually like to start off with a polling question for our audience. So we're going to launch the polling question and give you a few seconds to answer. So the question today is, how do you prepare your budget at your organization? Are you A, not budgeting today? B, using Excel? C, using Adaptive Insights or Adaptive Planning? And D, using other budgeting software? Okay, great. We'll give you just a couple more minutes to answer that. Okay, and with that, we're going to go ahead and close the poll. So it looks like the majority of you, we're going to share the poll with you in just a moment. The majority of you are using that age-old tool, Excel.
Yeah, Excel. The survey is not surprising at all. Most people, particularly, or most companies at a growth-oriented organization at the early ages are really using Excel. And even to some of our surprises, John, when you say we find a lot of companies using Excel way too long in the process.
Even a lot of the surveys, even companies getting into the Fortune 100 type companies use primarily Excel. So yeah, not at all surprising, but that would be the response from the group.
Okay, great. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Super. So we'll give a little bit of a highlight around Intacct and really what we're talking about, how Intacct functions as your core system. And when I talk about core, I think about the general ledger, accounts payable, the accounts receivable. Really think and even extend that out of the whole process from order to cash, and in some cases even quote to cash process. And then on the purchasing side of it, think of a purchase requisition that an employee can issue all the way through to the disbursement of that cash, and then even into the financial reporting. And so really what we want to, what Intacct will do is provide a foundation for you to, and I kind of think of on this slide, the unlock your data, provide a foundation for you to leverage reporting and take advantage of the Intacct's dimensions. And that's a new concept for a lot of high growth organizations that have migrated from QuickBooks or converting from another mid-market ERP solution of dimensions. And so the dimensions will enable you to start thinking about having that reporting capability on profitability by customer, profitability by vendor or supplier that you have. And those are some kind of interesting metrics and capabilities that we have of being able to track that type of information within Intacct, but also being able to take care of business analytics. So in every organization, there are certain key metrics that are ultimately driving financial success. And having those in your ERP system and budgeting against those and comparing your plans to what your actual results are will ultimately make the organizations perform better, because it'll be at the forefront of the organization. So really what we're talking with Intacct is a core functionality system of being able to capture your data within your system. And once you get data captured, you then have this capability of getting reports. And so the nice thing with Intacct is you can have dashboards that you can develop and customize for your own organization, and really think about this in terms of not only just a dashboard, but think about it as a dashboard for each individual within your organization. So really focusing your workforce on what's important to do their job on a day-by-day basis. And so what that means is if you start thinking about, hey, I need to get information into my line employees around accounts receivable and collections, maybe around the accounts payable side of managing vendors and when they're getting paid. Are you paying too early versus maybe holding back on them a little bit more? You can get that type of data sets here very easily. And so it could be delivered on dashboards, via reports, or even having that capability of once it's on a dashboard or a report within Intacct, having the drill down capability. And so you can also, if you're a user of Intacct and not doing it today, you can even have reports distributed out amongst other users, even people outside of the Intacct system. So maybe they're not a user, but they could benefit from a aging report every week and just have it automatically sent out every Friday for their division or region or department. So now we have this core ERP system that comes into play. There is always the need at almost every one of our clients, the need of some type of specialty tool that comes into play. And when I'm talking about a tool, it could be something of a payroll provider or a professional services solution called Keyed In, or some other type of a solution. Maybe there's a sales or Salesforce or some other type of CRM, a Microsoft CRM solution. We're finding that the need to integrate in these best-of-breed solutions, and when we mean the best, it's the best fit for that client or for that prospect. It's really important to make sure that that's being done, and you can leverage the functionality and features that are appropriate for your organization by doing that. And so in this case, what we're really highlighting is an integration with Adaptive versus Intacct, and being able to leverage that best-of-breed concept. And the difference of that is versus an all-in-one suite is that in the suite, it's the vendor's choice, not our client's choice. And our clients really find that to be a benefit, that they're able to take advantage of the investments that Adaptive continually puts into their product year over year, as well as with Intacct. They're very focused on delivering the best of what they can in their areas, versus an all-in-one suite where they have to spread their development dollars around. We're finding that to be a big differentiator in different types of systems. And just to kind of really bring it home in terms of the ability to do integrations. Most of our clients have 2 integrations. Intacct has a very open API to be able to do that. And today we'll be kind of focusing in on the budgeting and planning one, which is on the right-hand side, the 3rd tier down from the top, of really calling out that budgeting and planning with adaptive planning. But we have a whole bunch of other areas so if your organization has some specialty need or there's a gap that you have in your organization, you could always bring in a specialty product to make that work and have a really nice fit for yourself.
Okay, great. And now, thank you, Scott. We're going to move on to John Deniken. And this slide really drives it home that adaptive planning that you may have heard of in the past is now called Adaptive Insights.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, for those of you that might be following Adaptive, they announced it at 5 o'clock this morning that they were officially changing their name. So we did a little quick update here and change the name a bit. That said, for those of you that are familiar with Adaptive and its platform, while they're constantly making changes, they change their name, but the 4 key elements of Adaptive have not changed. We have the Adaptive Planning, which is the budgeting forecasting tool, the consolidation, which if you happen to have international operations, the old FAS 52 consolidations for those hardcore accountants in the room, Adaptive Discovery, which is our BI tool, so you can really kind of drive into data. And then we have the reporting module, which is also a key element that a lot of the Adaptive clients want to take care of. As Scott talked about a little bit, Adaptive does integrate with many systems, but we really talk about the integration we can do with Intacct. It really is what can drive the value of both of these systems together, bringing that data across into adaptive planning. In the many surveys that are done, and this is just one of them from Nucleus Research that was released a couple months ago, Adaptive continues to be the leader in terms of both usability and functionality. As you can see here, I mean, some of the bigger systems, IBM, SAP, Oracle, while certainly have a lot of tremendous functionality, the problem, of course, is that they're huge premise systems, require significant network capabilities, are far more expensive than Adaptive. Where Adaptive, you really got almost all the functionality, but much, much greater usability. So that's why Adaptive continues to score very high in all of the related surveys, whether it be Nucleus, Gartner, or whatever the survey may be. In terms of the customers that Adaptive works with, we've done, now these are not all, I wish they were all Armanino clients, they're not all Armanino clients, but these are all Adaptive clients, and you can see what this really shows is the tremendous industry capabilities that Adaptive brings. Whether you're in software, which obviously a lot of the companies here in the Bay Area are, manufacturing, healthcare, a lot of the nonprofits, consumer, financial services, communications, other various industries. Our ability to integrate the businesses of Adaptive and really kind of do the planning, forecasting within any of those industries, no matter what industry you're really working in. Adaptive, we've really kind of done it all with all those industries. So tremendous flexibility, tremendous capabilities to work with many, many different industries. And again, this is just to give you a little bit of the size of Adaptive before we get into the demos and a little more specifics. At this point, Adaptive is well over 2,000 customers, 400 partners. It continues to grow at 70% a year. It is in now 100 countries. It's number 5 on the Fast 500. You can see again some of the bigger clients that we've implemented with across the United States. Some of these are actually Boston Scientific, the Y, are a couple of hours that we've actually done ourselves. So let's talk a little bit more about specifically how Intacct and Adaptive interact and what we're going to really kind of focused on here today. When you work with the two systems together, what it really gives you the ability to do, of course, Intacct is your ERP, general ledger system. It is your system of record for all things, ultimately for all things financial. You may bring all the data from the many other systems that Scott talked about earlier into Intacct. But ultimately, where Intacct and Adaptive work together is all those actual balances and transactions that are in Intacct, whatever subsystem they may have come from. we can bring all those into Adaptive. And obviously that's key, because when you're doing your budgeting and forecasting, you need access to all that data to be able to do that effectively. It's more than just the trial balances. It's really having the access to all of that data, all those dimensions that Scott talked about, and the ability to do that and bring that all into Adaptive. It really makes Adaptive such an effective tool. And of course, in the reverse of that is also true. While you're working in Intacct, doing your actual transactions and postings, you need to know what your budgets are. You need to know what your forecasts are. You've updated those forecasts. So what we do, of course, is then we can, using the integration, we can bring those budgets and forecasts back into Adaptive, back into Intacct, so that you really have two fully integrated tools that work together, that have all the information you need, whether you're doing your actual transaction processing, your budgeting, forecasting, doing your reporting for your management. You've really got the integrated tools, and this kind of really gives you an idea of how the information can flow back and forth. And of course, none of these are static information. You're constantly updating these, bringing this information back and forth as the information gets updated and changed. So just a little bit of comparison. One of the questions we get all the time is, so I have Intacct, why do I need Adaptive? Or I have Adaptive, why do I need Intacct? And clearly, both systems have some functionality in common, but there are obviously key areas where they are different, and different functionalities, different capabilities they bring. And this is kind of a very high level, but it gives you some idea of what those differences are and what those points in common are. Clearly, Intacct is your ERP and general ledger. As I was saying before, that is your system of record for all things financial. That's where all the data, all your actual data ultimately ends up. And clearly that is not Adaptive. Adaptive is not that. Intacct gives you the ability, as we bring the forecasts and budgets back into Intacct, as we showed on the previous slide, Intacct does have the ability to track multiple budgets, maintain that information. As Scott alluded to, you can have budgets by dimensions. You can store your rolling forecasts. And having all that information in Intacct and available to you for your reporting or for your management, for your general ledger accounts, is obviously very important for them to do their work effectively. Likewise, of course, all that information also still originates and really lives in Adaptive as well. And the integration is what really makes these two work. On the reporting side, again, both systems have different users that Scott will talk about in a moment. But clearly, they both can be used to do budgeting, forecasting, income statements. We're talking about reporting here, budget versus actual, for income statements, balance sheet, statistical data. The question of where you use these and which system you use really becomes very much an end user preference, and also kind of really what your function is within the company. Different people will use the systems differently. Every client will use them differently. And Scott will talk about that a little more in a moment. But the key thing here is that, yes, both systems can do all of these things. They both do them very well. And it really kind of depends on how you want to use them and what your really function is within the company, which system you'd use. And of course, Adaptive is where you'd actually build your driver-based budgets. The ability to have assumptions and use those to drive budgets. We can budget by dimension. All those dimensions you've got in Intacct, we can bring into Adaptive. All the dimensions we're budgeting in an Adaptive, you can bring back to Intacct. It's where you're going to create your rolling forecasts in Adaptive. That's where all the detail is. That's where the assumptions are, the underlying scenarios. And of course, Adaptive is where you would do your what-if scenarios. You may or may not choose to bring these back into your general ledger, but many companies, the FP&A team, you want to look at your various what-if scenarios. What if you win the huge account? What is that going to mean to your revenue and all of your expenses? Hopefully not, but what if you lose some big account? What if you're going to do a significant transaction, a merger, an integration? All of your best case, worst case scenarios. All of those you can build in Adaptive, maintain those in Adaptive, report on those in Adaptive. And that's really it's that functionality and flexibility that really drives the value of Adaptive, as well as the ability to bring that information back into Intacct.
All right, so that really leads into which users do what in which system. And we do have some overlap that goes on, but just very similar to what John was talking about in terms of the functionality. Within the Intacct system, that's really where we're going to get the account reconciliations and do some external reporting where we'll see that and have a lot of end users being able to access that system and get the data. And part of what John had even mentioned earlier was really around, well, it depends on which user and what their role is and what system they're logging into as to which one do you want them to go into, whether it's an adaptive one or an Intacct one. And there could be good business reasons why you would prefer a user going into one system versus the other for some of the reporting. So for example, within Intacct, you can have time entry, expense reports, purchase requisitions and purchase requisition approvals, and expense report approvals. So maybe people are already logging into the Intacct system, and adding in that next level of a budget to actual reporting really makes sense for them to do it. One place to go for all of it. But in some of the areas of maybe a person has budgeting responsibility, and they're part of the corporate culture is the person that is responsible for updating the budgets and preparing those needs to go in and do that themselves, and that they don't have an FP&A person on staff doing it. And in those types of scenarios, it makes sense for them to go into the adaptive planning or adaptive insights solution and do the work right there. But also knowing that you can have access to very similar information within the Intacct system of some drill down capabilities to making it work. So there is some overlap that comes into play, and we can typically make a good recommendation based off of how that organization likes to work and their workflow that's important to them. So it's not like it's here's the only process that comes into place. It could be very meaningful to the organizations and really keep intact the corporate culture and the processes that have made them successful so far.
Great. Okay, and with that, we're going to move into some demos around reporting and rolling forecasts. So first, Scott will lead us into the Intacct demo. So this will take just a moment to switch over. And again, as you're listening, if you have any questions, you can certainly type them into your box, and we will try and answer those at the end.
Okay, so everyone can see my screen. I'm logged in as Tom Hayes, and on the landing page, I'm entered in on the CFO's daily view. And in this case, this is the dashboard that comes up, and it's really the key information that this CFO wants to have on a daily basis, in a sense. So revenue versus plan, really capturing that type of data, and being able to not only look at the report, but also be able to drill in and take a look at any of the transactions that happen within that. So you can do that simple comparison, budget to actual reporting, and drill into not only the general ledger, but also get into the underlying transactions that have resulted in that revenue. In this case, it's a revenue recognition schedule from a software subscription. So it's a subscription that was paid in advance, and it's being recognized over time, over a 12-month period. But being able to get access into that and at your fingertips of what's really driving the numbers or the changes, but have that on a daily basis, I think is really important for our customers and their organizations. Likewise, maybe logging in as Carla Grace, who's our CEO of this organization, and she wants to keep track of maybe some non-financial data, head count, and compared to plan, average revenue per employee, and comparing that to plan as well. So think about it as not only just capturing in data into the system, but also doing some basic math that gives you some very meaning statistics on that. But then also having your P&Ls or profitability compared to plan as well. Or in this case, in the software industry, some key ratios is really around the churn ratio. So think about having that value of identifying what your drop-off rate or subscribers that are not renewing on a go-forward basis of if you're not hitting plan or better in terms of that, meaning you have a very low churn ratio, and having that at your fingertips if you need to make any course corrections or keep your customers happy so that they keep renewing, you'll be able to get that type of information at your fingertips, but also budget against that as well in terms of your activity and really monitor what's going on. Or even something that's maybe not financial, but it's a leading indicator of bookings. So in this case, looking at what your bookings are to plan. So they're booked orders, they're going to be recognized as revenue over time in the future, and being able to compare that out over a period of time, looking at for the month, the quarter, the year, and so on and so forth. But also being able to really drill down into that capability. But kind of focusing a little bit towards just the budgets within the Intacct system. So if we look at it, Intacct can maintain multiple budgets, so it's not uncommon for us to see that a customer will have an annual budget that comes into play, plus a forecast or a reforecast. And in high growth organizations that are really moving very fast in the market, we can see having forecasts updated on a monthly basis, where they're really turning it out, where they're having some big changes in their organization, being very successful in the market, and they're growing quickly. And we'll see that they'll have, forecast month 1, forecast month 2, and then we'll see the comparisons between actual results, budget, and forecast, or rolling forecast being done by holding that information in the Intacct system. But also just looking at it from a standpoint of not only being able to budget by just your primary account number, but also maybe by your offices or your locations or your divisions, and really being able to get it down to that level. But looking at it over here in the upper left-hand area, these are the dimensions that are deployed in this case. You can really start profiting or developing out budgets and comparing actual results to those budgets from the account all the way to the department, location, individual projects that are meaningful to your organization. You could have it at that level. Profitability by customer. So if you have a large customer that's a big portion of your business, is that going up or down? Where's the gross margin coming in? A lot of big customers put margin pressure on our clients, and it's important to be able to track that information, as well as even by services or items that come into play. Or a common question with a lot of our clients is having profitability by salesperson. So you can really track it down to an employee. You can identify the employee that's associated with that level of activity and what's their profit coming out of that, and tie it into their customers that are associated with them. So leveraging those dimensions and getting that budget to actual data will become very meaningful as you go forward, and really capturing that data that will help drive the decision making, not only on an annual or quarterly basis, but on a regular, ongoing basis, by having that information in front of you and tracking those results quickly. So just to kind of recap a little bit, Intacct captures your actual data that comes into play, and it stores your budget, and then you could leverage the reporting that we can do within the Intacct system, both from a dashboard as well as creating your own custom reports down to profitability by customer, product, and item, and that type of activity. And again, we're capturing that information, and we're going to send it over to Intacct for our actual result, or over into Adaptive for our actual results. And John's going to go through and show us a bit about how the adaptive planning solution works.
Right. So
Thanks, Scott.
We're going to make that handoff here momentarily. Okay. So you'll soon be seeing the Intacct Insights. There we go. And again, since the change happened at 5 a.m. this morning, our demo environment has not yet updated, so it'll get there soon.
We'll get there. We're still working on it. So thanks, Mary. When you come into adaptive planning, one of the things you choose is where you want to land. I happen to be sitting at the dashboards right now because that's where a lot of people want to land. This is a slightly different view of a lot of the same information you just saw before. As Scott said, we're looking at, when we talk about various dimensions we can bring in here, we're looking at customer data, bookings, customer data right up here. We have bookings data, revenue mix. So you can basically look at whatever you choose to on these dashboards. Likewise, of course, because it is a budgeting system, you can look right here and you can see the budget versus actual results. And you can look in a little bit and you can see some detail by month. This is looking at 2013 and a little bit of 14. As you look at each of these numbers here, we'll look at some of this airfare and stuff. All this information you can drill right down. You can drill right into the transactions right from the screen. So just as you could in Intacct, while you're in the planning system, we brought that information over, and that information is immediately available to look at. So that information is always available to you in Adaptive as well once we bring that information over. So we have these dashboards, but Adaptive is at its heart, it is a budgeting, forecasting, financial reporting tool. So I just want to give you a real quick overview of how Adaptive looks before I jump back into some of the reporting that you might want to do. Within Adaptive, you typically will bring in your chart of accounts. Excuse me. I'll bring in the chart of accounts and the organization structure that you have within Intacct. And when you lay that out, you then can lay this out in the way you want to look at it for budgeting purposes, which may be very different than, of course, how you look at it for external reporting, financial reporting for outside parties. This is really more of an internal view. This is your kind of classic P&L. It's your revenue, your cost of sales, your various operating expenses that you might have. We also have, of course, you can do a functional P&L view, which if you look at it that way, you can look at the numbers here, and this is it's more of a summarized view that you might want to look at it by department. So you have that functionality as well. So when you're doing your budget, you can budget the way you operate your business, and not necessarily how you do your external reporting. One of the things that Adaptive does for you is, if you can see, it's a little hard to see on the screen there, but all the 2013 numbers are green, all the 2014 numbers are black. What that tells you is that you've got the green numbers in 13 are all actual results. So in this particular look at the budget, we are looking at the 2013 actual, and everything that's in black is a budget or a forecast. That's obviously key, because as you're looking at this, you bring the information over from Intacct into Adaptive Planning. One of the key advantages of Adaptive over particularly Excel, since most of you are using Excel, is that within Adaptive you only have a single source of truth. So if you brought your actuals over from Intacct, you now have them in Adaptive. So every version of the budget that you might create, for whatever reason, is always looking at the same actual. So you don't have the problem you often run into in Excel of trying to remember, oh, have I updated this file? Has this file had the latest information? Kind of the whole back and forth that you always have to do, and you're constantly updating lots of files. Within Adaptive, you simply have one single source of truth. As I mentioned, within Adaptive, and I mentioned before, you can create as many different budgets as you choose to. You can see here, and they just list right here, we're looking at the 2014 working budget. You can create new budgets. You can do forecasts. You can do various what-if scenarios. You have a what-if scenario here. And as we just look at these different ones, you can, of course, they all have different results based on the assumptions you're using and based on what you want to do with your what-if scenario. Likewise, we're sitting at the total company. You would bring in the whole organization structure. You can see that here with this particular little company we've got going on here. You've got your sales, your sales and operations, your corporate. You've got some subsidiaries down here. So you can look at those, and you can basically jump at any one. Of course, you can budget, and we always recommend, most people do want to budget their balance sheet. That's key not only from a balance sheet point of view, but more importantly because it really what drives your cash flow, which for most companies ultimately is what they want to be budgeting and forecasting, is the impact on cash flow. In this model, we of course have two versions of cash flow. This is your classic indirect model. This is very similar, mirrors what you would be doing for external reporting, mirrors what you're required to do for GAAP and reporting. Many of our clients also ask us to create a direct cash flow, which there's no actual 413 actual in here, but this is actual sources and uses of cash based on which customer the cash is coming from, and exactly how it's being used. Ultimately, it's the same information, but this is a little more direct in terms of kind of the checks you're writing every month and the sources of cash, rather than the indirect changes in accounts receivable or changes in accounts payable kind of analysis. And of course, at the heart, what we always want to do is a budgeting forecasting.